Welcome back to the Human Longevity Project. If you missed it, episode 4 took a gut-wrenching look at toxins and the damage we're doing to our environment. Despite the current crisis, the good news is we have the collective power to create immense change in relatively short order. If we just become a little bit more mindful about the purchases and decisions we make each day, we can create a monumental shift in the collective health. And for those who purchase this series, you'll receive our action plan, which includes direct links to a number of high-quality, eco-friendly products that will immediately benefit your health and the environment. In episode 5, we're going to look at the natural cycles of the body, EMF, how to improve sleep, the benefits of heat and cold therapy, and the huge impact natural light exposure can have on your health. This is a fun episode with lots of groundbreaking research and insights. So much so that in 2017, a Nobel Prize was presented to researchers studying some of these topics. Let's get it going. Enjoy episode 5.
The question of what is the purpose of sleep has been a fairly difficult one to pin down. Is there a solitary purpose of sleep, or do multiple things take place during the sleep phase that are important for healthy functioning? And I think that that's probably more the reality.
We are wired to be in the cycle of the sun. Our biology has a 24-hour cycle, and if we don't honor that, we don't have health. And so sleep is just not optional, it's not negotiable.
And if you're not getting enough of that sleep, it's kind of like having a computer that you never defragment, that you never clean up, and everything bogs down and runs slower. So for me, I think sleep it's like our time to defragment and kind of reboot the computer.
We know, for example, that lack of sleep or sleep problems, insomnia, is one of the biggest predictors of burnout syndrome and chronic fatigue. So that's clearly a big issue for a lot of people.
You know, sleep is really interesting because it's probably one of the best bang for your buck health tools. You just have to lay there, close your eyes, and do nothing. It doesn't cost you anything, and you can do it for as long as you need to. And it's just really difficult for people to do that these days. You know, I think a lot of it is culturally ingrained. We've made sleep lazy because of corporate culture that we're in, and especially in North America. You know, sleep is something that is frowned upon. Versus in other cultures where it's actually revered.
We have this cultural belief that sleep is for lazy people, sleep is for the non-productive, the non-motivated. If you really want it, if you want it bad enough, you'll only sleep 3 hours or 4 hours, and you'll get up earlier, you'll work later, and you're just going to grind through and you're going to get it done.
There's a few things that I think we need to take into consideration with sleep. One is, how did we feel about the day? Did we feel like we earned that day and then we earned that sleep? And the next morning is, you know, what are we excited about next morning, right? And so I think a lot of people dread the next day, and the next day is represented by that gap between the end of their day and sleep. So they actually subconsciously sabotage their sleep, because if they go to bed, the next time they open their eyes, they're going to be doing something they don't like.
Sleep-deprived people eat worse. People who eat bad have worse sleep. So the two go hand in hand. It's a self-propagating downward spiral. You sleep bad, you have inadequate sleep, short sleep, poor quality sleep, and the next day you're hungrier, you eat worse food, you're more stressed, that interferes with your sleep the next night, and it just keeps cycling.
And with several days of sleep deprivation, in neuroimaging, your brain actually looks the same as a depressed brain. So again, in neuroimaging studies, depressed brains and very sleep-deprived brains look very similar. And there's something about sleep regulation that's also involved in mood regulation, attention regulation, and stress regulation. So sleep really is this foundation of the pyramid on top of which we build all of the other cognitive resources.
So your brain's repairing, your body's repairing, and you're making all sorts of connections between the two. Right? Your brain's making connections with itself, your brain's making connections to your body. Muscle memory comes from your brain and your muscles coordinating. That happens while you're asleep. Any skill, any knowledge, anything you've ever learned, anything you want to master, when you're really mastering it, when you're really solidifying it, making it durable in your brain, making it durable in your body, making your body stronger and more resilient, is during sleep.
One really important aspect of sleep is learning. You can't consolidate or move memory from short-term into long-term permanent storage unless you sleep. Deep slow wave sleep, dreamless sleep, or delta sleep we call it, that's when consolidation is happening. But also, it appears like the brain is actually washing itself like a car wash or an old-fashioned clothes washer in the agitation cycle. So cerebrospinal fluid, which is this clear fluid that washes the brain, literally washes toxins and metabolic byproducts out of the brain into the lymph system, the lymph and lymphatic tissues. And when you sleep, it resets and washes all these metabolic byproducts out of your brain every night.
Sleep is something that usually takes a back burner. It's the end of our day, so unfortunately it gets the lowest priority.
The sleep cycle for me is very important. That I created a sleep anchoring technique where I tell my patients, your day begins at the time that you sleep, so that you actually account for it as the first part of your day that you have to accomplish, rather than saying, okay, it's the end of my day and I could just get rid of it. It's dispensable. So, but if you think of it as the beginning of your day, then it actually shows you, oh, I need to fulfill this part of cycle.
I get the question a lot of what's most important, sleep or physical activity or diet. The way that I look at it is, imagine a three-legged stool. What leg is most important? If each one of those components are a fundamental part of our healthy physiological functioning, which they are, then an individual might have greater need to address poor sleep or more physical activity or a better diet. But from a physiological perspective, none of them are more important than the other. We have requirements around each of those domains and others, and we need to try to meet those requirements as best we can.
その食生活、睡眠、これからその行い、そういうバランス性の行いが悪かったときに病気は重ねてくる。
What about sleep issues? Do you know people that they can't fall asleep or they can't stay asleep or they're always complaining that they're waking up and that kind of thing? Is that something you and your friends and the people that you know?
Mm-hmm. Let me think about it, man. I don't think so. Well, the one guy I know has a little bit of problems sleeping right now is me. And because I have a new business that is taking a lot from me, man. But no, not that I know.
¿Que no podían dormir?
Sí.
No. De insomnio, nunca se padeció. Oí que padecieran de insomnio.
¿Y ahora?
Pero es que no tengo como mucha relación con la gente mía. Ya está como en sus fincas, gente tranquila. No tengo esa información.
It's not always possible, but to wake up at the same time every day, to go to sleep at the same time, to have regular rhythms of eating, this is so critical for people. And we are discombobulated because we have the light bulb, we have our screens and computers, which keep us out of the cycles of normal rhythm. We don't get exposed to natural light. We're exposed to artificial light late at night, which affects melatonin production and our sleep quality. So all these things are happening around us, but figuring out how to live in rhythm in a way that supports your biology is a critical aspect of health.
The science of chronobiology has received a lot of press lately, and essentially because we as human beings have been slowly becoming insomniacs. And this is actually a sign that we have actually broken our rhythm.
This isn't a surprise, going back to the whole idea of how we evolved on this planet, and we use the cue of the sun as when to be asleep and when to be awake, just like every other organism on this planet does. And all of a sudden we said we don't need to do that anymore, and sleep became a luxury.
And so if you've ever gone camping or backpacking, it gets dark and then you go to sleep. And that's, you're not watching late night TV or checking your email, in the middle of the mountains. And so, I think and then when do you wake up? You wake up a little bit before the sun comes up. And so that's a natural rhythm I think human beings have had, since we've been exposed to light and dark, which is basically all of our existence.
Y ya esa era la tertulia de la noche y a las 7, 8 de la noche todo el mundo dormía.
Circadian biology was this crazy, unknown field of biology until 2017 when the Nobel Prize was awarded for figuring out how this works. And it turns out everything in the body has a rhythm that's tied with the day and night cycle. Your blood cells, even, that don't have mitochondria, they need to have potassium and magnesium highest at a certain time of the day. Everything's a rhythm.
Sleep has always been enigmatic because you have to get that into that regenerative state. And it's, in fact, for me, the way I consider it, it's the driver of the cycles in the body. It's known that if you just removed the light cycle from the body will function on a 26-hour cycle. So we are actually regulated by sunlight. We're yoked to the sun, so to speak, in terms of the cycles that we have inside our body. In Chinese medicine, for example, there's a particular way that they would be giving herbs. You have to take particular herbs at particular time of the day because of the activity of certain organs in the body. And although that's an older system of looking at things in an energetic way, we are finding this now to be true in Western medicine. There are certain drugs that are effective in the morning and they're actually not effective at any other part of the day. We've seen that liver size actually doubles during the day, or goes to 1.5 to 2 times the size of the day and then actually reduces itself at night.
What circadian rhythms do is they help to look at past behavior to then try to predict a physiologic response for that time of day. And that's why we don't want, the body doesn't try to have you get up at 7 times during the night while you're sleeping to go to the bathroom. So you feel hungry during the day, you feel like going to the bathroom during the day, and at night there's a whole other set of physiological activities that take place that are suited for that time of day.
Well, it turns out that since everything you do is designed for rest and recovery at night and functional performance during the day, if you break those cycles with junk light, or with making yourself too hot when it should be cool at night, or with eating a huge meal after the sun went down, your body is expecting to eat during the day and hide at night. That's what bacteria did 2 billion years ago in the ocean. The same thing keeps happening.
And then during the day, we actually have to have our exposure to sunlight. Vitamin D is central to us. And exposure to sunlight, actually, if you take a look, the dawn has more blue light in it, the sunset has more red light in it. It actually determines also how our bodies respond to it in terms of cycles.
This light frequency is very special. The brain evolved in a natural environment, and the brain knows, based on what color the light is, what time of day it is. So there's optic nerves that go from behind the eyes into the brain, and they cross. It's called the chiasm, the optic X, the chi, the Greek letter chi. Just on top of the optic chiasm is a nucleus called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the nucleus on top of the optic chiasm. This nucleus's job is to sample the temperature or color of light hitting the retina, and from that determine what time of day it is. So early in the morning, that first hour of sunlight, the brain really notices that, and the circadian rhythm gets reset. Now this is very critical. The circadian rhythm is not a fixed rhythm. It's a 24 to 26 hour rhythm, but it needs to be entrained or reset back to the Earth's rhythm, which we call the photoperiod, the light-dark cycle. So when the circadian rhythm and the Earth's photoperiod become synchronized, then we have really good marshaling of energy and resources and sleep and alertness. But when those things drift past each other, we end up with lots of dramatic issues in cortisol and stress hormones, and the brain can actually deteriorate from being a sort of free-running and not well entrained to the Earth's photoperiod.
When we look at shift workers, police, military, fire, new parents, medical professionals who are thrown in that shift work environment, one of the first things that they experience is significant cognitive decline.
We know that people that do shift work or that have chronically misaligned circadian rhythms, they have 4-fold increases in cancer rates, they have multifold increases in cardiovascular disease and risk. It is a clear indication that the body is not functioning as it should because it doesn't understand what time it should be doing things. And so you have this misalignment that is affecting our health and our performance. We know that it impacts memory, we know it impacts cognitive functioning, like executive functioning, and physiological processes too.
And so to make sure you're getting the maximum benefits out of that morning circadian entrainment, go outside within the first hour after dawn and get some light in your face. And do this every day. 7 days a week, get up the same time of day. And this will teach your brain really strongly what time it is and cause a much stronger circadian entrainment against the Earth's photoperiod, which will keep you healthy much longer throughout your life.
And there are certain cues that you can use to enhance the robustness of that clock. We know that movement and exercise in the morning is one strategy to actually allow for a well-regulated circadian rhythm. Does that mean you need to get up and do a CrossFit WOD? No, but it does mean that some kind of light morning movement, stretching, yoga, a walk in the sunshine is actually great for the circadian biology.
They didn't have electricity, man, so literally the sun set and that's it. That was it for the day. They needed to blow the candle and go to bed. Because very early in the morning, Grandpa will just wake them up to go work the field. And they will probably happy. I mean,
They seem happy.
Yeah.
Like even the older generation.
Yeah.
They seem to look back on those times and still with fond memories.
鶏がいますね。あれが朝4時にコケッコーと言ったら起きて、そして食事の準備して明るくなったら畑に行けるように、こういう世の中がいろいろと変わってきたのが今この世の中、アメリカの世の中に生まれ変わってきたんですね。
Το πρωί ξυπνούσα και να πάρω βόλτα όλα αυτά τα ζώα που είναι απαραίτητο κάθε μέρα να γίνεται αυτή η δουλειά. Ύστερα προσδιοριζα μια δουλειά που θα πάω, πότε θα πάω στον κήπο, πότε θα πάω για τα δέντρα, πότε θα κάνω τούτο, κατάλαβες. Έκανα πρόγραμμα από το βράδυ. Δεν είχα ωράριο. Πότε έτσι, πότε αλλιώς, αλλά ήμουν σταθερός το μεσημέρι. Μία, 2 η ώρα έπρεπε να κάτσω. Το πρωί σηκωνόμουν στις 7-8 η ώρα. Το απόγευμα πάλι στη δουλειά. Το βράδυ θα πήγαινα ψυχαγωγία στο καφενείο, να βρω ένα φίλο, να κάνω κουβέντα, συζήτηση.
Only in the last 10 or 15 years have an understanding of circadian rhythm that's now been derived by science, has it become a part of the equation of our health. Same with gut microbiota, same with epigenetics. Before that, it was, diet and exercise, right? And now we know that there's these other things that are really fundamental that are at play.
But unfortunately, in modern society, we have what? We have cell phones, we have lamps, right? We have electromagnetic frequencies that totally throw off our rhythms in our nervous system.
Junk light is a major issue for us now. Over the last 5 years, we've installed light that tells our body that it's midsummer all day long, much more so than it did 10 or 20 or 100 years ago. And it is breaking our ability to make energy. We are wired to be under full spectrum sunshine, which has ultraviolet A, ultraviolet B, infrared, things we can't even see. And it has a normal mix of blue and red and all these different colors and the whole rainbow. Well, when you go indoors and you turn on that new white LED light that's supposed to save a lot of energy, there is no heat. Your body senses heat, and it's like, wait, something's wrong. I'm getting, I'm getting high fructose corn syrup from a light bulb. That's what's happening here. It is just an extract of the light that we need. And when you feed yourself only that extract, it's no wonder that your sleep quality goes down. It's no wonder that you don't make as much melatonin. It's no wonder you have food cravings at the end of the day. It's no wonder you're tired and cranky. Type 2 diabetes rates are going up. Macular degeneration is going up. These are functions of the light environment, which is shocking when you think about it.
Inavame di lamba, I plegame, I balloname, le seduje so vradi. I vallame da ballo, ma da ti. Che? Anche venghiere, se piena, vendicatura, chi mi lusa, vendigliani storie, schiliani.
La candela carburo, non c'era altro mezzo, no? Purtroppo, in quel periodo era così.
When you come to realize that there's thousands of studies showing that our bodies react to light no more or less than plants. It's that important for us. Our skin is light sensitive, our eyes are light sensitive, our brain is light sensitive. You realize that the type of light you put into the system should matter quite a bit. The last 30 years, we said, well, let's save some money. Like, let's take out parts of the light spectrum so we can just focus on this narrow visible spectrum. Well, if you look from an energy perspective, great, well, burn less coal. This sounds like a good idea. The problem is that decision was made by people looking to save electricity. What they didn't know and couldn't have known back then was that by changing the mix of different colors in the light, by removing heat from light, which is infrared, then our body responds differently to the light. Because the physiological stress that bad light puts on your body, it's subtle, but when people take steps to fix it, they feel amazing.
Bueno, el primer bloque eléctrico que hubo en 1951 más o menos, 50 por ahí así. Pero antes había lo que se llama faroles. Había una que lo prendían con canfín, creo, en las esquinas, que había un farolero que encendía eso.
To Marina, podejranie to. To? To jest domindało kto?
Even now, a majority of the villages and towns we visited were completely absent public lighting at night. Compared to most towns and cities in the US, the difference was quite noticeable. Sadly, it's quite rare for people to experience darkness in many Western nations, as the ambient glow of cities and towns permeates into remote areas. Light pollution now fills the night sky, reducing our ability to access the health benefits of darkness.
Majority of cells involved in immune function carry receptor for vitamin D. And therefore, the more we expose ourselves to the sunny environment, the more vitamin D is going to be produced, and that is going to affect the functionality of the immune system, meaning the better immune function.
Mi papá, cuando nacía un niño, siempre lo sacaban al sol en la mañana, porque ellos decían que recibían vitaminas en la piel, necesitaban sol, un poco de sol. Entonces ese niño se mantenía unos minutos ahí, se bañaba, se higienizaba y se llevaba. Pero actualmente los que quedamos de mi familia sabemos el problema de la capa de ozono, sabemos la abertura que tenemos y todos los efectos tóxicos que tenemos del sol, ¿verdad? Cáncer de piel, etcétera, etcétera, ¿verdad? Una cantidad. Por eso, por el descuido del hombre, porque el hombre ha sido el único culpable de esta situación. Pero en aquella época, yo no creo que los hombres de aquella época hayan tenido culpabilidad en eso. Porque es que se sabía vivir con la naturaleza.
Ultraviolet has two major components. There is sun hits your skin, and that's UVA. You have glass, between you and the outside world. Then that's UVA that's hitting your skin. And what it does is actually it induces the production of ACTH. We used to know that ACTH only occurred in the brain, but now we know that it's produced by the skin. And when it's produced by the skin, ACTH actually still induces the production of cortisol, which then serves to wake you up during the day. And that's how our skin is actually tied to the sun cycle as well. UVB has been shown to stimulate the production of vitamin D, and that's kind of well known.
Vitamin D is synthesized in the skin in response to sunlight from cholesterol. So it's a modification of cholesterol that produces the vitamin D. And when it's produced, then it's also sulfated. And so sulfate is also produced in the skin in response to sunlight. I've written papers about that. I believe that eNOS is the molecule that does that. Very interesting molecule. And when it's attached to the membrane, it responds to sunlight and it produces sulfate. And then the sulfate is combined to both cholesterol and vitamin D, and both of them are shipped out. So you're not getting just vitamin D, you're getting vitamin D sulfate, and you're also getting cholesterol sulfate in response to sunlight. And I actually think that cholesterol sulfate is the more important molecule. Vitamin D is a signaling molecule, so it goes to the liver and it says, hey, look, we've got vitamin D, that means we've got cholesterol sulfate. It's not really it's not supposed to be supplying something, it's just supposed to be signaling that something is being supplied. So what vitamin D has done is if you have vitamin D it's gone through all that process, it's verified that sunlight is making cholesterol sulfate in the skin, the liver CYP enzymes are working, the kidney CYP enzymes are working, so now, Sal, you're good to go. Everything's happy. That's what the vitamin D is telling. It's a messenger telling the cell that's receiving it that things are okay. So if you start taking, for example, if you just took vitamin D sulfate as a massive supplement, your cells would be very confused because this supplement would be, first of all, the vitamin D would be distracting those enzymes from the job they should be doing, which is making the bile acids, for example, in the case of the liver. Because there's all that vitamin D, it has to turn that into, it can't do it without sacrificing its real job. So you don't want to have huge amounts of vitamin D that's supplied through diet, artificially, through a supplement. You want to be able to get the vitamin D through natural methods because other things are happening along with it that are important. And if those things don't happen, the vitamin D is lying. When it sends a signal, it's lying.
If you think about human history, if you are a blue-eyed blonde, then your ancestors came from northern cultures where you probably were wearing clothes. And if you come from an equatorial heritage, then your skin is darker because nature is wise and gave you your own sunscreen and the melanin and the pigment in your skin. But we as Caucasians in a modern culture can't go outside for a few hours, mostly clothed, and expect to make adequate vitamin D.
Look at tanning alone. The production of melanin is a photochemical process with regard to the amino acid tyrosine and how that interrelates then to the production of melanin, a secondary biochemical, from only certain wavelengths of light that are exposed. So yes, an extraordinary topic, photobiology and its relationship to health.
It's funny trying to sell people, what's one thing to do to improve their health, their longevity, their performance. And the funny thing that I recommend, even though I'm like the food guy, is go outside and get in the sun. And they look at you like you're crazy. They're like, okay, so I put on, sunscreen for that and a big hat. I'm like, no, get naked to the point that you don't disrupt your neighbors and get as much sunlight on your person as you can.
I'm a big believer in 15 to 20 minutes of sun exposure every single day. I'm always outside working out. I mean, I prefer that over the gym. A good amount of sun exposure every day is beneficial for the skin. I don't use a sunscreen. I'm not going to make a sunscreen, I don't think. People ask us about that all the time. I would rather stay away from the titanium dioxide, the zinc. You see some of these really toxic ingredients of sunscreens, and you're doing more damage than you are good for your body.
They say that we're the first culture in history that doesn't worship the sun. We fear it. We hide. We put sunscreen. We're crazy about it. I don't use sunscreen, never have used sunscreen. I'm not a big fan of sunscreen because it's stopping my ability to absorb the sun.
The problem is, many of us had it kind of drilled into our heads when we were young, you should never step outside the door without putting sunscreen on. And there are a couple issues with that. Number one, of course, it prevents us from getting those benefits of ultraviolet light exposure. But number two, a lot of sunscreens have been found to have toxins that are really bad for us.
So in this case, we put all of that and then we go under the sun. We prevent from entry of good molecules into our system, but in the meantime, lots of toxic chemicals enter into our, through the skin, into the body and overwhelm the immune system. And they're both, our innate and adaptive immune system is going to suffer significantly from that.
La crema naturale, un po' d'acqua, lavorata con e si faceva la pomata. Si metteva un po' un pezzo di erba, si mescolava insieme e si lavorava e poi si faceva la crema.
So the sun, of course, can cause skin cancer. Although ironically, the skin cancer rates, the rates of melanoma skin cancer have been going up exponentially in step with the exponential rise in the use of sunscreen.
I think there is a time and a place for sunscreen, but certainly sticking with ones with more natural ingredients is a better option. And even better, just using, limiting your sun exposure and using, long sleeves and hats and clothing to cover up once you've had the amount of sun exposure that's safe might even be the best approach.
Bueno, yo le hablo con el hijo mío que antes no llevaba sol y sol, nadie le prohibía el sol ni nada, que el sombrero sí.
Y el mismo sudor de uno le mantenía fresco el cuerpo. Y ya llegaba uno del trabajo que fuera, sí, se quitaba la camisa y dormía un rato si tenía que ir a hacer algo. Ya está. Eso era, no le molestaba nada.
You know, we live indoors so much that oftentimes we forget that we evolved outside, and the sun plays this critical role in our metabolism. Light goes in through the eyes and communicates with the hypothalamus, which is kind of the master governor of our metabolism. This influences adrenals and thyroid and sex hormones, really everything downstream from that.
We see a peak in testosterone, right? Like sometime between 7 and 9 a.m. We see like a grip strength and a post-workout protein synthesis and a body temperature peak sometime between 4 and 7 p.m. We see a rise in leptin, like an appetite regulating hormone in the mornings. We see an increase in melatonin in the evenings. We see another surge of leptin while you're asleep between like 2 and 4 a.m. Like there's all these different hormonal cycles that are tied into that 24-hour biological clock.
For example, when light hits your visual pathways, those visual pathways go into the optic chiasma, then they hit this area called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, that then hits an area called the habenular pineal pathway, and that starts to circulate melatonin. So just like waking up and seeing light immediately changes your circadian rhythm. And it's something that doesn't happen day from day. It takes months and months to change that pattern. And then as you change those light visual pathways so you can sleep and release melatonin, there's another effect from the periventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus, which controls the hippocampal areas, and that controls cortisol rhythm. And in order for us to be healthy, the pineal pathway and the cortisol pathways have to work in synergy with each other. And this is why it's so important to like stabilize your blood sugar levels and sleep at the right time and get up and exercise at the time where you have the best peak activity of your awakeness and response. Those things make a huge difference.
When the certain tone and intensity of light is coming into the eye, it's affecting something called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells, which are types of photosensitive cells in the retina that will communicate not to the primary visual cortex, but back to an area of the brain called the master clock. And that master clock then is then saying, okay, this is the time of day that it is, therefore initiate these programs.
In the morning, when the sun hits us, your cortisol levels go up, and that wakes you up. So it determines your day cycle. So just imagine if we're actually living in an artificial light, we lose that kind of signal. And so does the thyroid hormone. The thyroid hormone goes up together with your cortisol to sort of like mark your wakefulness in the day.
Melatonin will directly affect pancreatic beta cells to suppress insulin release. Insulin, as we know, will store glucose, right? So if you're suppressing insulin, it's going to actually help to keep blood glucose available in your bloodstream for longer. And right, you're going over a 7-hour fast. Now, that's not the only thing that happens. You also see a buffering of blood glucose by a growth hormone response in response to slow wave sleep. That also will cause insulin insensitivity, which typically is thought of being a bad thing, but it's actually an adaptive physiological response to maintain blood glucose. Then during the night, it changes. So as you go through your slow wave sleep and then into more REM sleep, you see towards the end of the night more cortisol being released. That then helps to then produce more gluconeogenesis in the liver and also to release some glucose from your cells. Altogether, you have different mechanisms, all circadian controlled, that then help keep stable blood glucose levels while you're fasting.
I really am working hard on getting sun exposure to the eyes, which will then allow the pineal gland to make the sulfate, and it'll make the heparin sulfate. And then when the evening comes and the light dims, then that triggers the pineal gland to make the melatonin. And then it attaches the melatonin to the sulfate that came from the heparin sulfate that it made earlier. So if it doesn't make the heparin sulfate, it can't sulfate the melatonin. If the melatonin is not sulfated, it's not transportable in a water-based medium, so it can't go out into the cerebrospinal fluid. So you can get a deficiency in melatonin because of a deficiency in sulfate.
Dopo, da grande sì, ma da giovane no, eh?
So when you're actually sleeping, your rhythms are working. You have a cortisol rhythm and a melatonin rhythm. And as you actually fall asleep, from the time you fall asleep, your melatonin levels go up. But melatonin isn't just a sleep hormone. Melatonin is an immune priming hormone. Your melatonin primes your T cells and your regulatory T cells.
So if you don't get enough sleep, your entire immune system is dysfunctional. That's why most people notice if like they miss a night's sleep, they get sick the next day, or they're prone to getting a virus. If they're getting exposed to those antigens all the time, but now they didn't have that melatonin release throughout their nighttime and to change their tolerance. And taking melatonin isn't the fix. You actually have to have that rhythm go up by itself. So it's not a burst of melatonin once, it's that rhythmic secretion of melatonin. So starting the day, how you lose your tolerance. You don't get enough sleep.
なかなか病気しても医者にかかるっていうのはできなかった。もう眠って治す。
And we really are set up for this kind of optimization of getting out in the day early, and then when the sun goes down, really having very minimal light exposure. And what we tend to see, by contrast in modern living, is we get very, very little intense early day light, and then we get far too much evening light, which disrupts the HPTA axis and tends to keep us in this constant kind of fight or flight mode when we should be heading down and going to sleep.
If you look at somebody on a cortisol pattern, you can run a saliva sample and see. If you just implement 10 minutes of morning daylight, it's like 10 minutes. Oh, I don't have 10 minutes. Schedule it. I guarantee you can find 10 minutes. Just that alone, I've seen people's cortisol levels just skyrocket, where someone was flatlined, meaning like their iPhone battery was at 7% charge. They're exhausted. They can't get out of bed. They have to have coffee or exercise to feel normal. I just give them a prescription of sunshine, as much skin exposure as you can, gaze at the sun, put all of your energy that direction like you're an Egyptian worshiping the sun. All of a sudden, hormone levels come back online. All of a sudden, food cravings go down. Sometimes they lose weight, which I don't even know the mechanism of how to explain that. How are you losing weight? By just doing the sun.
This orchestration of your physiology is all being timed so that you end up having, good stable energy levels, and you're not waking up in the middle of the night because you're starving or because something is alerting to you because of poor bioenergetics. Circadian rhythms are, again, trying to anticipate what the needs are of the body based off of past experiences and exposures, so that, for example, if you typically eat at every morning at 8 a.m., the body is going to prepare enzymes that are going to help to process that meal. If you are eating a certain type of food every single day at that time of day, those enzymes are going to be suited for breaking down that type of food at that time of day.
Bueno, la hora que tenía antes uno era a las 11. Y ahora come uno, no come una hora, come a veces a 11, a las 12, y no come a la hora que tiene, a las 5 de la tarde.
So food timing is very important. And there's the obvious things like we shouldn't eat right before we go to sleep. And, obviously we shouldn't eat right before we exercise, and we're going to be super, super physically active. But if we look at our circadian rhythm, and basically our circadian rhythm means how our hormones fluctuate throughout the day, and certain hormones are going to be higher in the morning, lower in the evening. Cortisol is highest in the morning. And cortisol's main function is to raise blood sugar. So if you've been sleeping all night, and you need to get up and start your day, you're going to need some blood sugar in the bloodstream in order for your cells to be energized for you to carry out function and then hunt or gather or do whatever you need to do. So in the morning, it's probably important for us to have a very light meal because energy is actually being produced by our hormones. So if you couple cortisol raising blood sugar and then you have a high sugar breakfast, then you're in trouble. Now, lunch is when our digestive system is strongest. So that's when it's probably most appropriate to have your largest meal. And that's when you're going to be hitting your stride. So in the morning, energy is going to be fueled by your hormones. The midday energy is going to be fueled by food. And then the rest of the day, in the evening, you want to probably have a lighter meal because you're not going to be as physically active. And you want to give your digestive system and immune system a bit of a break so that you're not spending your night digesting food, you're spending your energy at night in healing and repairing and regenerating.
In our society today, oftentimes people are having a late night snack. So they're eating food, driving up insulin before they go to bed, which number one is going to affect their sleep quality. Number two, they're not going to get that same level of metabolic flexibility because their body's not going to be tapping into that body fat. Plus, when you don't sleep well, you're going to have elevated stress hormones and, in a sense, more of a chronic, low-level fight or flight response that's going to take place.
And when we eat at night, it changes the rhythm for acid secretion, what the bacteria are doing for you, fermenting. our body starts digesting, and that's actually a good relaxing response. However, it's it's going to take energy away from actually what we need to be doing while we're sleeping, which is regenerating, the lining of our gut, which happens about every 3 to 4 days.
There's a concept called autophagy, which is really all about recycling. At the cellular level, there's consumption and digesting, breaking down and recycling a lot of these old, damaged, broken down cellular parts. Now, in order for this to happen well, we have to be in a fasted state. And it happens specifically during the fasting window at night. Now, one of the problems in the modern world, especially in the modern Western world, is that as the day length has changed due to modern artificial lighting, we're staying up longer, we're sleeping less, we're also we're eating longer than we used to. So what's called our feeding window has now extended to many more hours of the day than it used to be. There's research actually showing that the common feeding window for most people now is around 14 or 16 hours of the day, and that most people are only in a fasted state basically just during the time they're actually in bed, during the time they're sleeping. So oftentimes 8 or 9 hours a day. Well, where it should be is more like 12 and 12, meaning a 12-hour feeding window and a 12 or 13 or 14-hour fasting window. And the reason that's important is because if you think about this concept of autophagy and how this has to occur during a fasted state, if you're fasting for a much shorter period every night, you have much less time for your body to actually get into autophagy and go into this process of repairing broken down and damaged cellular parts and rebuilding new healthy ones. So what happens is that over time, when this occurs on a daily basis for months or years or decades, is that our bodies build up, they start to accumulate these damaged and dysfunctional cell parts because we're not spending enough time each night breaking them down. So ultimately what that means is we're functioning tomorrow on today's and yesterday's broken down and worn out cellular parts.
There's indication now that a shortened eating window, so having a long overnight fast of at least 13 hours, associates with better outcomes in people that have breast cancer and less incidence of breast cancer. And that probably translates to other types of cancers as well. That's just where we have the strongest signal at the moment.
There appears to be something really woven into our genetics that intermittent eating tends to be quite good for us. Not all organisms are like that. Cows and sheep and horses are supposed to eat all day. Humans, being this kind of opportunistic omnivore, we seem to really benefit from that punctuated eating. It seems to improve the gut microbiota, tends to improve digestive function. That wake-rest cycle seems to be really important for us.
The reality is that you have more control over the food that you take in the morning, I would say. I would say breakfast tends to be more of an independent act. Dinner is more with family, it's more with friends, it's more social. And so what I think is a good heuristic now is, where do you have greater control over the variability of your diet? So for me, that means that I have more control over breakfast. I'm still interested in exploring eating breakfast late, but doing so at the exact same time every day. So I don't want to be eating breakfast at 8 a.m. one day, and then noon the next day, and then 8 a.m. the next day. I think that creates a problem. If the body, again, is trying to predict appropriate physiological responses based off of previous exposures.
People who have disrupted sleep or disrupted hormones or leptin insensitivity or insulin insensitivity, many of these people actually need to jumpstart their day with breakfast, with food. It's actually it's a circadian signal. And so food and even things like including plenty of protein and fat with breakfast is a smart idea to enhance your circadian biology. Once you have a robust circadian rhythm, can you get some benefits from things like intermittent fasting, breakfast skipping? Probably. But if you have issues with sleep or issues with hormones, it might not be the best idea for you to skip breakfast.
One of the things that became clear in our discussions with the elders was the tremendous amount of physical labor that was consistent across all the societies we spoke with. Because of this, eating out of boredom or snacking out of habit didn't exist. Their work schedule often dictated their meal timing, and in order to enjoy a meal, they would generally have to consciously take a break from their work. After the workday was done, they would typically have dinner around sunset. Not only were they conscious of daily meal timing, they also had to follow the seasons. since there was no way to preserve or ship food great distances prior to 1960 in most of these areas.
You have a network of a quadrillion ancient mitochondrial bacteria in your body that millions of times a second are sensing the environment around you to figure out what kind of energy should I be making right now. And they're exquisitely dialed into timing. They need to know, is winter coming? Because if winter is coming, you need to put on fat because you're going to need it because there won't be any food. We evolved that way. And if it's summer, like, what am I going to be doing? I'm going to be eating more carbohydrates. So they look at light, they look at temperature, they even look at phases of the moon, believe it or not. They sense all of this without us having to think about it, and they change your energetics inside the body. You're actually biochemical, bioenergetic stuff, not the meditative kind of energy. And when that happens, and then you screw it up by going out and having a milkshake full of sugar in the middle of time when your body says there should be no sugar available, it'll look at that sugar and go, oh, it must be summer again. So now part of you thinks it's summer and part of you thinks it's winter, and you get a mismatch inside the system. We evolved to eat more carbs when there's bright light and sunshine, and we evolved to eat more fat and moderate protein during winter because there weren't refrigerators. You couldn't get fruit flown in from Peru in the middle of winter. And if you do it occasionally, it doesn't matter. But if every single day, all year round, you have a banana for breakfast, you're doing it wrong unless you live in a place where bananas grow every morning.
I'm also really big into just eating seasonal because those things are available at a certain time of year for a reason. And that's what we know from ancient traditions, right? And we also know about just me living in the Pacific Northwest, I need to be eating more berries and more greens, more cruciferous vegetables. There's a reason for that.
Ναι, γιατί αυτά που βγαίνουν τις άλλες εποχές είναι όλο με φάρμακα. Και σίγουρα αυτό δεν πρέπει να το τρώμε ποτέ. Αυτό που βγαίνει τις άλλες εποχές είναι γεμάτο φάρμακα. Βέβαια και τις καλές εποχές που βγαίνουν βάζουν φάρμακα. Γι' αυτό πρέπει ο άνθρωπος να προσπαθεί να τρώει οικολογικά προϊόντα, διότι μπορεί να είναι λίγο πιο ακριβά, αλλά αυτά που θα ξοδέψει στους γιατρούς ύστερα και ότι θα είναι και η ζωή του μικρότερη είναι πολύ περισσότερο η ζημιά. Και έτσι πρέπει να προσπαθεί να τρώει λοιπόν, να στρώει πιο λίγο και να είναι οικολογικό.
One important aspect of growing your own food is you have a deeper appreciation for the seasonality of food and the quantity of food as well. So when these raspberry shoots start running up like this and they're producing berries, you know, I'm lucky if I get a handful every day in you know, September and August and some of those warmer months where the sun is out for very long. So it gives me a different appreciation for, you know, instead of going to Costco and getting the 5-pound bag for $9.95 of blueberries and throwing that in smoothies like crazy even in the winter, it makes me really realize that, you know what, we need to be mindful about how much food we consume, even if it is quote-unquote gluten-free or low carb, etc. Because it takes a lot of investment, it takes a lot of water, it takes a lot of time. So we want to really be a little bit more mindful about that. I think it's an important component of health.
When you take a look at being able to eat various kinds of foods that are grown locally according to season, you know, then you will have a diversity of foods instead of having artificial rules.
When it comes to the foods you eat, and I guess maybe most people, is it still seasonally based? In other words, you got papaya season and mango season, these type of things. So do you notice that people are still eating in a seasonal way, whether it be dry or wet season?
No, we do. We still go by the season. I mean, the base of rice and beans, we have to have it, yes.
Sure.
And the rest, it goes by the season, especially when it comes to fruit.
You know, it seems a little bit hippie or you know, soft science to recommend that one would eat seasonally. But if we think about our metabolism and if we put some value on that metabolic flexibility, which I think is a very defensible scientific position to be in, then seasonal eating is going to imply that we're going to change both the macronutrients, the protein, carbs, fat, and also the micronutrients of the foods that we're eating. And within the evolution of all organisms that consume something, there's two dueling banjos here. There's optimum foraging strategy. You want to get as much as you can get without and avoid toxicants, and nutrient deficiencies are really kind of the two things there. And so if we're eating very consistently the same thing, you have a higher likelihood of nutrient deficiencies because you're getting the same profile day after day after day. And also we're not goosing that kind of metabolic flexibility. So you could make an argument that even at equatorial regions, when they've looked at non-human primates, when they look at hunter-gatherer groups and humans, their diets change quite dramatically day to day, week to week, year to year, and at different portions of the year.
Many of the people who have healthy mitochondria actually eat foods that are according to season.
It's important to respect where you are living and what kind of foods and the atmosphere where you're living affect the quality of the microbiota.
There's sleep, there's food, there's stress, both dealing with handling psychological stress and also seeking out stressors so that we have different exposures, exposure to the sun, exposure to cold and hot. And those are all stressors, but those actually will facilitate an important biochemical signals that are a part of our health.
Heat, cold, wild plants and other wild foods, sunlight, and even, there's some theories that low amounts of radiation, very similar like sunlight radiation, may actually produce this very interesting protective effect.
Τα δικά μας περιέχουν ραδιενέργεια. Και τώρα τελευταία βλέπω και κάποιοι άνθρωποι το φοβούνται. Εγώ όταν ήμουν εκεί.
One of the things we were excited to check out in Icaria were the hot springs. When we would visit each one of these hot springs, we were surprised to see that there weren't a bunch of people there. They were empty. So much so to the point where we had to actually search to find one of the hot springs because there were no signs, there were no people, there was no infrastructure to support some sort of tourist attraction. So they still existed in their natural form, and it was amazing to be able to experience these, much like Icarians must have hundreds or thousands of years ago.
Υπάρχει λοιπόν μονάδα, υπάρχει πηγή που έχει 600 μονάδες ράδιο. Υπάρχει άλλη πηγή, αυτές που λειτουργούν τώρα λέω, που έχει 300 μονάδες ράδιο. Υπάρχει άλλη πηγή που έχει 160 μονάδες ράδιο. Υπάρχει άλλη πηγή που έχει 75 μονάδες ράδιο.
What we learned was that each one of them had different properties that were they could be utilized for healing. Some were good for the skin, some were good for rheumatism. They all had their unique characteristics.
Ναι, πώς, πάνε πολύ. Λένε πως κάνουν καλό. Τώρα, εγώ προσωπικά δεν έχω πάει, αλλά έχω ορισμένες περιπτώσεις που πηγαίνανε ανθρώποι που ήταν σχεδόν, τους κρατούσαν να πάνε και βγαίνανε καλά.
Όλος ο Άγιος Κήρυκος και τα θέρμα είναι γεμάτο με θερμοπηγές, γεμάτες ραδόνιο, οι οποίες βοηθάνε πάρα πολύ τον πληθυσμό σε αρθριτικά, σε εκζέματα, σε ευγονία και βοηθούν πάρα πολύ στη μακροζωία των Ικαρίων.
We control our environments. We can, when we're inside a room, we control our environments when we're outside by putting on multiple layers of clothes. And that all adds to more comfort, less stress.
So our ancestors didn't have access to hot water all the time. So when they wanted to bathe, oftentimes it was cold. And the body actually releases endorphins. There's all these different benefits that come about when we do something like a cold shower or cold bath. Same thing with sauna therapy or just being in heat. We know extreme heat can actually stimulate endorphins and stimulate all these different anti-inflammatory peptides within our body to reduce inflammation, to give us more resilience.
You know, don't go outside when it's cold and you're going to catch a cold. That's probably true if you don't get cold exposure often. But if you do get cold exposure often, then you're actually building resistance. You're building resilience. And that's a part of our health, is to build resilience.
Small, moderate excesses of cold, getting yourself to the point where you're shivering, where you're expressing fat-burning hormones like adiponectin and irisin, or engaging in heat stress like a daily sauna or a weekly sauna where you're producing a lot of heat shock protein, great in small amounts.
We do know cold exposures will trigger something called heat shock proteins and also cold shock proteins. What these do, these are chaperone proteins that will help to prevent protein aggregates. We know Alzheimer's disease builds up a protein aggregate called beta amyloid. We also know that they will add to stress resistance.
I start off most days with a little bit of hot-cold contrast, right? Like I'll do like a hot-cold shower if I'm traveling. If I'm at home, I'll do like an infrared sauna where I get a good sweat on, and then I'll go do a cold soak, right? And I don't expose my body to excesses of cold because I don't actually want that added stress, but for a couple times a week, where I might do a longer cold soak, like swim for 15 or 20 minutes in a pretty cold pool.
Everybody has a version of the heat, and somewhere in there, people have the versions of the cold that have been being used. But thermoregulating is, you know, that's the master system. That's the one that keeps us in equilibrium. I have had a relationship with cold for a real long time. I always loved how invigorated it made me feel when I swam in the river. I grew up swimming in these rivers of mountain water in the shade, you know, like I said, just in your surf shorts. So if I start with like a 5-minute ice to begin with, then I can stay in the heat. I'll stay in the heat for 30 minutes, you know, before I come back out. First of all, immediately you feel it's doing something. Like you just, however you want to take it, you go, hey, this something's happening here, and then you start to crave it.
Sauna without a cold plunge is not a sauna for me, because the good solid research on health improvements is by doing the combination of hot and cold, not just the hot like we Americans do. We like to do the comfortable hot thing, and then, you know, we rest afterwards, and then that's a sauna. No, the sauna is you go in a hot, you chill out a little bit, you go in the cold plunge, and you chill, and then you go back in.
And heat and ice is probably the simplest way, besides breathing, that you can stress the system.
Are you going to probably produce some immune system issues if you sit in an ice bath for an hour a day? Probably. Are you going to be electrolyte deficient and possibly even cause some cellular damage due to excess heat production if you do like a sauna for 2 hours? Probably. But these things in small amounts actually confer a pretty profound protective effect.
Through modern building practices, we've really lost the natural exposure to seasonal temperature fluctuations. The hormetic effects of even moderately hot and cold temperatures can really improve the health of our mitochondria. And as we saw in Greece, even low levels of radiation appear to be helpful. But how about the current levels of radiation created by technology? It's only been in the last 20 years or so that many of the villages we visited in Costa Rica, Japan, Italy, and Greece have started to incorporate technology in the way of cell phones and the internet. And while their presence is growing, the elders we interviewed still had virtually no relationship with these technologies. So when we look at the effect of electromagnetic radiation on longevity, we have to remember that the elders in these regions had essentially zero exposure for almost their entire life.
So in nature, you have certain types of natural EMFs. So saying EMF is dangerous is not accurate. You have UV radiation, for example, that you need to produce vitamin D that supports your immune system, that protects you from cancer, all sorts of things. So that's important. If you get in the sun for too long, you get burned. So UV can do harm and can do good. The same thing can happen with different types of EMFs in nature, but there are also types of EMFs like the microwave signals that we're exposed to from cell phones, from Bluetooth, from Wi-Fi, that are fairly new. In Mother Nature, the levels that we were exposed to compared to the average city these days were a quintillion lower.
We know that heavy exposure to Wi-Fi can affect your calcium channels on your cells, your voltage-gated calcium channels, and actually affect the electrochemical membrane. The body is a human battery, and it's actually not meant to be exposed to very high levels of, for example, Wi-Fi signals or cell phone signals or pulsed magnetic fields that are in the frequency of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions of hertz compared to the 3 to 100 hertz that we might get from the earth or from water or from the ground.
When we're looking at health and science, often we forget some of the most fundamental building blocks of how biology is in fact created. Now ultimately it's always the rules of physics that dictate the rules of biochemistry, which in turn dictate the rules of biology, which in turn dictate what happens in your health. And unfortunately, Western science often ignores the rules of physics, whereas ultimately everything in life is about exchanging energy. And if we don't actually look at how this energy is exchanging, we miss an awful lot about our health.
And until we actually become as committed to spiritual growth and development in science and acknowledging the subtle energies and developing technologies to measure the things that we keep downplaying because they're not scientifically validated, we're running the risk of death by science.
With smartphones, there are actually a couple of different issues that don't get enough attention. One is the potential impact of EMFs and cell phone radiation. And that is, of course, still a very controversial issue. Many studies have shown no harm. Some studies have shown harm. It's very difficult to piece it out at the moment from the available research that we have. But there are a couple of things that are important to keep in mind about that. One is that it's just possible that the timescale that we've been looking at so far has not been sufficient to reveal an effect. And that doesn't mean that an effect won't be revealed later on. And there's a saying, lack of proof is not proof against. So it's very possible in my mind that something could turn out to be true. And I think when that's the case, when there's some uncertainty, the precautionary principle applies, which is to say that you might as well take precautions in case there is an effect, like not wearing a Bluetooth thing on your head, 12 hours a day, and even using a wired headset to keep your phone away from you and not carrying it in your pocket. Because the downsides of those are, I think, those actions, which is maybe just some inconvenience, are far outweighed by the potential downsides of the technology itself.
Science is behind, simply. There are thousands of studies on the effects of cell phones. Most of these studies, when they're studying populations, are on 2G cell phones. 2G cell phone, no one uses them these days. We're on 4G, fourth generation, and we're rolling towards 5G, fifth generation. So the science is behind 20 years. So if you want to know what devices are doing to our body right now, there's actually no way to have proper amount of studies to then have scientific consensus. So that's part of the problem. The exposures are new. By the time they will have studied 4G, 5G will be out. By the time 5G is out, we're going to be at 8G. And the iPhone 24, I don't know, but it is increasing so much and so fast that there's no way to tell what the long-term consequences will be.
I try to tell people you have a sympathetic and a parasympathetic system. Sympathetic is your fight or flight system. Your parasympathetic is your repair system. So when I tell people, for huge parts of history, you had very little stress in your life. You had all this extra capacity to heal. When you get a good night's sleep, you heal. We weren't designed to be under stress 24/7. The Wi-Fi's, the cell phones, it's shocking that, and we can't even feel most of this stuff. And my point is, when your cortisol's up, your immune system is always shut off.
The most dangerous sources of EMFs are the ones that you keep close to your body. So if you have a cell phone, it's an emitter, it's a strong emitter. If you put it here, you have 100% of the danger. The more distance that you put between you and a device, the more the signal drops in an exponential way. So it means that on 1 foot, some people would think, okay, maybe it's 20% reduction. No, 80%. 2 feet, 90%. So it means that if you keep your cell phone in other places, if you, instead of putting it in your pocket all day, every day, you put it on your desk in front of you at 2 feet, you've reduced 95% of the problem when it comes to your cell phone. Same thing for your Wi-Fi router. So if you put your Wi-Fi router under your bed, I've seen that. I've seen people have a Wi-Fi router under their bed. Why? Maybe the tech guy thought it was a good idea or it was convenient. They didn't think twice about it. Put the Wi-Fi router as far away as possible from your bedroom and your living areas. So in the corner of the garage is good. In the corner of your bedroom is not. Ethernet cables still exist. Thank God. You can use, if you use your computer at a station, either it's at work or at home, I have a home office, there's no reason you should be on Wi-Fi in reality.
Wi-Fi, for me, I turned it off when my wife was pregnant. We started sleeping better.
we didn't change anything else. Wi-Fi does influence your sleep patterns. Wireless technologies influence melatonin production. A guy named Dr. Neil Cherry did this study back 20 years ago that showed that these electromagnetic radiation can suppress melatonin, which is not just important for sleep, it's one of the most potent anti-cancer hormones that we make. And I thought, okay, I want to give myself the most optimal melatonin production possible. How do I do that? I'm going all wire, basically wired, old school connection. And it's easy, it's faster, you don't have to worry, and you sleep better at night.
If you look at EMFs, do we have studies that show harm? Well, we have thousands of them. So it's not true. It's not true that it's doing nothing. What scientists disagree on is, should we take action? Should we reduce our exposure or not? And that's the question. 2017, the mayor of Krakow in Poland was elected, and his main promise as a politician was removing cell phone towers from downtown areas and removing the electrosmog, or at least reducing the electrosmog in the city. People were in the streets. Just like you see a march against Monsanto in the States, you see a march against EMFs in Poland. Another thing that happened in 2012 is the Indian government in the major region of India, so that's probably hundreds of millions of individuals that are touched, they looked at effects from EMFs and they said, you know what, cell phone towers and EMFs overall are a threat to human health. That's the government talking. So they dismantled thousands of antennas to move them outside of these downtown areas. And among other things, they decided not to put any cell phone towers near schools, near hospitals, and near playgrounds. And it makes sense. A lot of people use also these new smart watches, Fitbits, wearables. I've heard about now Bluetooth bras and what. There are some crazy things happening. Well, these things are also adding to your exposure. So unfortunately, I know a lot of people are almost married to their Apple Watch and this and Fitbit. Well, it's always constantly pulsing, and that's in your major arteries. So I can tell you it's harming you, but there's pretty good indication that it is not making you any healthier, which is kind of ironic because these things are supposed to track your health.
Mr. Christopher came in here with a low smoldering leukemia. He was here for back and neck and some other problems, and as I kept asking him questions about his life, when I got to the electric blanket, really, how long have you had electric blanket? Well, 12 years. How long have you had leukemia? 11. I said, his dad, he said, it's funny, my parents give us a new electric blanket for Christmas every year. So, shut the electric blanket off, his leukemia shut off that day.
So the closest people live to a cell phone tower, at least in multiple studies, the sicker they are. And that's just an overall statement. It's basically you're going to see a couple symptoms happen the closer you get to the tower. So at 50 meters, which is it's in your backyard, they were seeing the biggest increases. And then the more people moved away, the less symptoms they experienced. The three most pressing or frequent symptoms were fatigue, insomnia, and depression.
I had a Parkinson patient. I was taking care of him for 20 years. He was doing beautiful. And suddenly he started going down, and he was dead within 6 months. I didn't know what the hell was going on. I went to the house. Somebody had installed a smart meter, and that was within days of that. He started going down and was dead in 6 months.
Hitting airplane mode as frequently as you can, especially when you sleep, because this is when you want to heal from all the other EMF that you're getting in your environment, from everything that's aging you, everything that's stressing you out. It will go away during your sleep.
Shut down the Bluetooth. Get the Wi-Fi router out of the room. Get off the laptops. Get the TV out. Get the DVR out of the bedroom. It's easy and it's free. All of those things I just mentioned, those are free, and those can improve your sleep, your health, 50% within 3 weeks for me. When I cut off the Wi-Fi, I started sleeping better. When I cut off the breaker, my daughter, who was sleeping in our bedroom, who's not influenced by placebo effect, she was maybe 14 months at the time we did this, she was waking up every hour. We cut off the breaker. She started sleeping through the night.
lifestyle change. Number one, switch off the fuses at night. If you can, get a wired connection to the internet and get rid of the Wi-Fi altogether. Minimize the use of the cell phone on the head. At least do texting. Use a traditional landline whenever you can, when you have a choice. These are some basic discipline things that everybody can do.
Thanks for checking out episode 5 of the Human Longevity Project. Let us know what stood out to you the most in this episode in the comments below. I hope you've been enjoying all the content so far. The hard part for us was knowing that we had to trim 100 hours of amazing health information from our experts to less than 12. Not to mention all of the incredibly inspiring stories and insights that we collected from the elders around the world. We already know that people across the globe are living into their 90s, 100s, and beyond. We know that they do so practically free of chronic diseases that plague our modern societies. And we know that if more people had the information we uncovered from these remarkable people, as well as our amazing experts, we can all live happier and healthier lives too. We saw firsthand people living long, fulfilled lives. They were active and they were filled with joy, purpose, and gratitude. We want that for you as well. And as you'll see in this next episode, one of the most important factors when it comes to health and longevity is a healthy childhood. That's why we've made it our mission to improve the lives of 1 million children. We've partnered with several organizations around the world in order to make this happen. These organizations build birthing centers, train skilled birth attendants, and educate communities on safe motherhood. They also provide portable incubators that have already saved the lives of nearly 300,000 babies. By purchasing this series, you'll join our community and will be helping to save the lives of mothers and newborns in developing nations that don't have access to the care they need to survive complicated births. Click the link below to join us on this very important mission. Remember, there are just a few days left to get the entire series, all of the interviews, and other bonuses for more than 50% off. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.